You're listening to ChainLeak, the crypto news podcast with your host, Joshua Roomsberg. Follow and subscribe today.
Welcome to the ChainLeak podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Roomsberg. Today's episode is sponsored by Syscoin. Today's guest, the co-founder and lead developer of Syscoin, Jag. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Excited to be here.
All right. So first, give us a breakdown of what Syscoin is and what you are looking to accomplish in the industry.
The ethos of Bitcoin, decentralized sovereign security and financial assets, settlement of value, but with the virtualization of any sort of computation. So think of the worldwide supercomputer secured through Bitcoin, basically.
What separates Syscoin from Bitcoin? I know they're merge mine. I know you can merge mine Syscoin. What are the differences between the two networks?
Bitcoin isn't expressive on purpose. It's kind of like early in the days, Satoshi decided to take out the Turing complete opcodes, so it cannot run in a cycle, in a loop, and it cannot run generalistically to do any sort of programs. The use case of Bitcoin is to be kind of like the bottom of the value pyramid. There's derivatives of everything, of money and gold and oil and all that stuff as derivatives on top of whatever the most valuable thing you can have because of the tokenomics and the security mindset behind it. And it doesn't need to be sort of like everything in a box. And the difference between that and us is we take the security of that and we attach all sorts of utility in terms of generalized virtual machine. You could do a world computer on, basically. So you can build your general programs to do anything you need and scale it up, but still be as secure as the Bitcoin stack and as decentralized and trustless.
Now, you guys also have a layer 2. How does the layer 2 play a part in the ecosystem for Syscoin? This is a separate chain?
These are separate chains, but they're settled on top of the base blockchain. The idea there is you want to scale in a modular way. You don't want to scale in a way where everything's happening in one spot. Because if you're the way the blockchains are constructed is in a monolithic blockchain, everything is copied everywhere by every node and recomputed. When we get all sorts of new use cases and IoT and smart city starts to leverage this technology, the bandwidth and the computational cost is just going to be so high that we will not be able to support regular nodes being able to catch up or validate that the history is syntactically correct. It's just going to be so much information that we will never be able to catch up. Moore's law says every other couple of years the computation and bandwidth doubles, but we will be exponentially adding on to the cost and never be able to catch up at some point. And it'll be prohibitively expensive for an average person to take an average machine and catch up to the state of the blockchain. So in order to stop that from happening, you have to break things up and make layers. So if you're interested in one side of the story, you just sync up to that side. If you're doing NFT, GameFi, and your application's over there, if you really are a cybersecurity nerd, you want to make sure the system is safe according to what you see. You want to verify it. You could run that component. You don't need to sync up the whole thing. And the base layer becomes free to be basically very limited and very precise in what its job is. And that's providing the global kind of security, the underlying underpinnings of everything that's happening at the base layer, like a court system would be. And society is running on top in many different layers.
So the layer 2 is basically the network that allows dApps and things like that. Can you build dApps on the main chain for Syscoin?
You could, yeah.
But it's going to be cost expensive.
Yeah, you're going to be competing with the rest of the world on settling on that base layer, and the gas is just so limited there, so it's going to be more expensive. It's also prohibitively slow. It's purposefully slow just because it takes. We want to make sure when we introduce finality to the system, we did add finality. That's something Bitcoin doesn't have.
Okay.
Finality is a way for you to say, after this many blocks or this amount of time, we cannot roll back.
So the security aspect is on the main chain.
Yeah, it's security and decentralization, the Nakamoto coefficient for, if shit hits the fan and things blow up and bombs are going off and servers are going down, it is secure from the worst case scenarios. You only need one other node to ever sync up to verify that your system is safe, and the system will progress itself. One miner and one node is required to progress the state of the system. It's different than in proof of stake or some other systems which require stake or some sort of stake to guarantee security. And if you don't have that, or if they screw around, you can have a halting condition, which is the end of your fault tolerance, right? The fault tolerant system is supposed to be tolerant to faults. If you have a fault, the system stops. That is the definition of a dead system. You have to fork and keep it going. Ethereum's ethos is more of, okay, if it forks, we're just going to take all your money and we're just going to force you out and keep going. But what if that is AI? Or what if that is government that has unlimited funds? That they just, for fun, they want to, everything's hyperinflationary. US dollar is going up, say it's going 50% inflation a day. The cost of that attack goes lower and lower in relation to Bitcoin.
All right. Now, I'm thinking about that. You mentioned AI. How would AI play a part in not only Syscoin, but the blockchain industry as a whole moving forward? Do you see any use cases for AI?
If you look at if you look at every innovation that's happened ever since we've come, conscious being has come into existence. There was the cars, the wheels, industrial revolution, and being able to create the internet and all this sorts of stuff. Everything is crunched up if on a hockey stick graph towards the end, right? We had first we had the internet, and the internet needed some sovereignty to send value without intermediaries. There's blockchain, and the AI is starting to come around now, and the AI will need the blockchain to be able to send value without the slow human beings in the way to watch things and KYC things. There's no such thing KYC to an AI machine, right? It's not a person, it's a thing. And so it won't require people, and it needs a blockchain to send and receive value, to settle value, to tell other agents, here's my digital identity, to record that digital identity, to send around ZK information related to attesting components of that digital identity in a private way. So my long-term thinking is the only main use case of blockchain is AI. Really, it's humans. If there's two ways to go about it. If AI is bad, it doesn't matter what we do. Who cares? We won't be there. But if AI is good and it's helping us, we will have abundance resources, abundance of energy, abundance of food, abundance of everything needed, because the unlocking event of AI bringing all those sorts of utility, especially if it's super intelligent, we're going to never need to do any work. We're going to never need to really have to do anything. So we won't ever have the need of a blockchain to do financial transactions, because finance is not going to be a thing. The barter will just happen automatically because we have super intelligent beings doing it for us. And the only use of it will be disintermediating access to information, to any sort of value or digital identity.
You don't see the use case for payments in the future? If AI takes over, you just think that AI is going to handle payments themselves?
We don't know what that future looks like, but we know that it's going to need systems that require disintermediating from these archaic systems we've created for ourselves that lasted the last about 100 years, and those are now dying. They're even dying for ourselves. Of course, AI is not going to have. They're not going to be okay with it. So it's going to need, and if it's really a bootstrapping mechanism. Like the blockchains we see today are prehistoric compared to what a super intelligent being would be thinking. So it'd be probably rewriting. First of all, it would rewrite the idea of it would be sort of like a forking mechanism to introduce. Okay, here's Bitcoin. Well, let me take Bitcoin can't change its model, not to change, but here's Syscoin. Let's take Syscoin and then supercharge it with all these new, unique quantum-based features that unlock bazillions of throughput items per second at no extra cost and even more security. Of course, we can't write that code because we don't know. We're not that sophisticated, but it could.
Now, that's what I think about personally, because even if the AI is running the entire network, and communicating amongst themselves, I still feel like there has to be some kind of payment mechanism, even if it's between AI to AI. Another thing you just mentioned is quantum. Now, when quantum takes over, how could that affect the blockchain industry as a whole? Do you see that as something that could alter the industry moving forward? I think there's potential for it to be bad for the entire industry. It depends on how it plays out, how certain blockchains are adjusting to quantum computing and how they can outperform. What's your take on that?
It depends on if we are in the event horizon. Are we in the event horizon of AGI or not? Because if we're not, then we just have to worry about ourselves, which is not that big of a problem because we're not that smart. So, I mean, the worst you can do is have someone break the encryption or asymmetric encryption and read messages on WhatsApp and stuff like that. You'd be able to maybe mock some signatures of public keys that have been exposed on Bitcoin that have some value. The ones that didn't.
That was the biggest thing that I seen personally is the ability to read different private keys, the ability to they're supposed to be so encrypted that a natural human is not able to crack that code. But a quantum computer, even if it takes 3 days, if it can crack that code, we have a problem.
Yeah, and that's why we use change addresses, right, in the Bitcoin world, because those ones are one-way hashes, and you can't use those same algorithms that are brute force based to solve that problem. So you're a little bit safer, but a supercomputer and AI definitely still could. So
is that exclusive to Bitcoin and Syscoin?
So in Ethereum, you're reusing your public key again and again, so it's not doesn't have that safety, but there is some hope with account abstraction. There's some really cool concepts where you can create new sorts of authorization mechanisms. It may not be your public key, but it may be some sort of quantum safe signature that you have to create to authorize.
So there is a potential for the Ethereum network to counteract quantum computing in the future.
Yeah, and it would actually even be dynamic because account abstraction is a smart contract. So your wallet becomes a smart contract, and that's the way that everything in the EVM world is going towards. So you can even say, okay, I'm playing a game and I think I'm only going to send $100. So let me just encode this $100 of USDT to a PIN code or a password plus PIN code. Right? And therefore, if it gets stolen, that's fine. But my whole stack, I'll keep that secured with this special quantum resistant signature mechanism. And that one is my private cold wallet or something like that.
Now, you also announced a partnership with Super Oracles to tie into the Web3 and AI for the future of blockchain. How does that partnership benefit the Syscoin network?
Yeah, they're doing some cool stuff in terms of how they use an MPC algorithm, but they adjust the MPC oracles all the time, and it's not adding cost to putting it on the chain. And so we were thinking about unique concepts of like off-chain matching engines and sending the oracle prices off-chain, even not even putting them on chain, but just storing the aggregate public key of the MPC algorithm inside of the chain, but the message off the chain. So you can zoom out messages from the oracles 1,000 times a second if you're updating oracle price feeds for perpetual markets, for example. But you only have the one public key on the chain that gets shifted every hour or so. So the security is actually pretty good because only within the hour can you collude to steal that system, the money in that, or change the prices at will. But after the hour, it gets shifted again. So if you're attacking that system, you need like a really large percentage of the validators in Supra to be able to hack that system. It's kind of like an iteration on top of maybe ChainLeak. And ChainLeak is going down this road as well, and they're also looking at ZK as well. But this sort of thing is probably like the best we can do with external validators, external price feeds. And so we're trying to plug it into our layer 2s and our layer 3s and our app chains and concepts that require really, really safe external pricing or external information or external market.
Now, you speak about pricing in the external oracles. does Pegasus, you guys' decentralized DEX, do they take that information from these oracles?
Yeah. So
how do they get their data?
There's a little bit of alpha that's coming now. So Pegasus right now is a layer 1 DEX, right?
Okay.
And then there also will be a layer 2, and I can't say much more, but there'll be a layer 2 DEX that will be running on top of our of Rolex. And then and then the product is going to spread further even to do more high-speed trading and compliance systems on top. So Pegasus itself has multiple products. It's becoming kind of a unicorn of trading. And it will rely on Supra in some ways, maybe not the on-chain variant, but perhaps like off-chain variant. So once maybe we could do another episode on once we announce that sort of thing, that the exact names of the individual sub products and how they work and the branding associated. Then we can go into exact details on the roadmaps of those products and how it relates to the broad Pegasus brand.
Okay. Yeah. One more question while we're on the subject. Have you guys thought about bridging other main assets in the industry onto Syscoin?
Yeah, we have seller and multi-chain bridges that definitely work. But as you know, the blockchains are more of like islands, and they have those bridges, and the bridges are made to be broken. So we do have to be safe there. But the multi-chain and the seller bridges have been up for a long time, and they're pretty good. And we can also offer atomic swap based ones. So some of the interesting ones are around atomic swaps, which are completely safe because it's the user's discretion to wait for a certain amount of time based on his security. And a few other really cool concepts around optimistic based bridges are coming. We let like the market dictate that. And however people are bridging between blockchains is easy for us to plug in, especially at the EVM layer, because it's standard. And that's another big thing is standardization. We don't want to recreate the wheel. Even though we are based off of Bitcoin originally, we are also the EVM compatible. So we didn't want to deviate away from what the EVM world is, even though it's not the most efficient design for general computing. It is the most safest design for general computing, and performance should come elsewhere, right? And that's where
you have to have that availability to expand with where the industry's moving.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Like if that's where all the developers are, you're gonna have to cater to them. If there's another gold standard tomorrow, we can consider adding it. But the main thing is we are secured through Bitcoin, and we are not deviating away from that consensus design. And when you go down the modular roadmap, you end up having these very specific problems. And we've solved those specific problems, and that's what makes us unique. Because anyone can stand up a blockchain and say, sure, we're merge map Bitcoin, we're Risk, we're Stacks. Sure, we can offer smart contracts. We can offer layer 2s. But when you get into that world, you realize that it still won't scale. It doesn't do what you want it. You might as well just clone Solana and just did a monolithic blockchain and let it freeze every other day, and you're good to go. You end up at a data availability problem. And that's the thing that Ethereum is working towards now, their next big thing. And we've solved that like independently the same way as well.
Okay. Now, you guys also have Syscoin Labs. Mm-hmm. Could you explain to the community and listeners what Syscoin Labs is?
Yeah, that one is a kind of like that's our for-profit like productization avenue. So in order for us to really get the ball rolling, we need to make money. You need to show that there's traditional, it feels archaic in some ways.
Revenue. You have to generate revenue to keep it moving.
Until like blockchains take off and really everything's using it and everyone's depending on it, you're always going to have to relate it back to how investors think about valuations, and that's revenue. So you have to have products that people want to use, that want to pay for that, and that has to trickle out back to us so we can grow that whole ecosystem further. So it's almost like a bootstrapping mechanism on top of the blockchain.
Do you have a specific date for when Syscoin Labs launch, or is it already available?
It's kind of pre-seed stage, so it's like more friends, strategic investors and stuff like that. We're looking for who wants to make a big difference in this industry and the long-term vision that we have, not just people looking for short-term, quick bang. It's more
Yeah.
who's in this for the long run, who understands, which VCs understand where we're going, which Web2 entrepreneurs want to get involved in this and can make a big difference. So around maybe consensus in Austin, we'll probably look to make a splash and announce it and show like who's behind us and whatnot. But and then there's products as well we're already working on there.
Right. That was where I was going to go next. Do you have any products you could speak on today that would be available once this fully blossoms into what you guys are trying to create?
Yeah, like the trading, the social wallet, and even AI components are stuff that we're working on that the industry sorely needs. That generally, like even multi-wallet support for some of this stuff with bridges back into Syscoin. But those, like, we think
social wallet, that sounds crazy.
Yeah, we think there's a missing gap with the nerds just use wallets today, but there needs to be a social connection to people, almost like Twitter, almost like WhatsApp, that needs to be connected. And then think about adding an AI as a way for you to get things done much quicker. Maybe a advisor that needs to tell that you want to code in and say, hey, tell me what the best swings are on this chart, do the trading for me, or hey, book some travel for me and tell me $500 in Mexico 2 nights, the best, and then just give me the links. I could click on it, pay for it. Or I just want to learn. I just want more information. So tell me more information about something. That's where we start. And in research, maybe we start.
That would be a cool aspect to be able to go to your wallet. And if you're searching about a specific network, to be able to type to that AI, give me information about this network, and have the breakdown and give you a 15-minute write-up of what you need to learn about that specific network before you enter.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very curated to what the user wants rather than pushing down a narrative to them. It's dynamically creating a portal for you to learn and interact. And then the Pandora's box would be when we can teach the AI to store a secret. Because if you can store a secret, then it almost becomes a dynamic smart contract, right? And you don't need to settle it on the blockchain if the AI itself can store that and keep a secret on its own under certain conditions, unlock those funds. So that's some of the stuff we're researching.
How does Syscoin Labs incorporate rollups?
So we start on Syscoin because it has that data availability component built in. So there's no other place to do rollups that will be as secure and as scalable than on Syscoin. If we didn't have data availability or there's a problem with how to scale up our blockchain in that way, we would have launched on Ethereum because it has that shared security already. But we're not big believers of that security model. We think long-term into generations to come, it's the Bitcoin security is actually an innovation on top of proof of stake, if you think about it. And we don't really need it. And even in the ZK, all in ZK succinct models like Mina or in Ethereum, the roadmap is to go ZK everything. You still need some sort of external consensus, and we still prefer that not to be proof of stake. And energy is becoming cheaper. There's fusion and quark energy that's going to reduce the cost. So the bottleneck won't be extracting energy out of the environment, but it's always going to be the bottleneck will always be the human behavior and the fear and greed that breaks these systems, and we need to prevent that. The only way is to relate the direct energy to a digital transformation of that energy. There's no other way.
Now, do you consider personally Syscoin an alternative to Ethereum?
I think
the layer two. Is layer 2 an alternative to Ethereum?
I think the layer 2 would be our layer 2 would be alternative to something like Arbitrum and Optimism. Even though we are sharing the code and actually helping upstream in their development. So it's kind of like agnostic in that we use that technology to build in the data availability, we help upstream, and then we also grow together and learn, okay, where does ZK plug in and how does ZK plug in responsibly and build it as a base. That is shared, but the network effects are kind of separated. So users, if they value the security, once it gets big enough, there will be no looking back. It's almost like, why wouldn't I value the security first and plug in here. It's fast enough. It's scalable enough. It's cheap enough. I don't need to go anywhere else. Right now, in the oncoming months, since our narrative isn't strong enough, it's still in the infancy. Ethereum's narrative is strong enough. Most of the alt L1 space will move back to Ethereum because Ethereum's data availability solution will be there. It'll be the cheapest, fastest, more scalable. And proof of stake wise will be the most secure blockchain that there will be in the proof of stake realm. And our take is we take that and we say we are more secure from the SHTF moments where things break down. And in that moment, you will value the securities. So at that moment, maybe you will just say, I prefer to stay there. But if there is multi-chain use cases and you say, oh, there's a lot of liquidity in Ethereum, I'd like to take advantage of it, you will be still using those other blockchains until you look at the 100-year picture, people say everything ends up towards one. So either Bitcoin figures this stuff out, becomes roll-up focused, which is not a good idea because that's not what Bitcoin is, or something that's backed by Bitcoin security is doing that job, is doing what Ethereum's roadmap is, but with that security and scales up in the same way, as much or better than what Ethereum has done.
Speaking of roll-ups, what was the reasoning behind you starting to work on roll-ups, and why was that important?
We first started looking at ZK around 2016, 2017. We started seeing it come around, but it wasn't realistic around till 2019. And that's when we realized that general purpose computation was going to be a thing that can scale. Because before that, we were very bearish on the concept of having an EVM. It was very clunky, very slow, not cost prohibitive, and it didn't promote decentralization like we thought it should. As we were very big in the concept of assets and double spend protection, and as a base layer, as a court system, secure, and then everything with payments would have been off chain and sort of like a Lightning Network style integration. And then we saw ZK. We're like, you know what? This is removing the computation off of the base layer. Your base layer is free to do the court system stuff we want, but then all of the fun stuff could be done off the base layer, and you can scale that up and provide economies of scale for the first time, which means the more people jump on the system, the more amortized it gets per transaction, the cheaper it is per user, the more revenue there is per user and transaction as well. So that was kind of a light, we were waiting for that, and that was a light on moment for us. Since then, it's been, getting to production to that sort of solution. The industry still is trying to get to production. There's no real good production software for layer 2s yet. None of the solutions today are really production ready. I think maybe Arbitrums is shown to be probably the best, but now with Polygon ZK AVM coming, it'll probably take the mantle until the next one comes.
Is that a back end situation or a front end situation that's not built up to the standard yet?
It's both. Front end because
is it a user interface?
Well, it's both, because if you don't have economies of scale, you can now offer the Web 2 UX to users. So you have to take shortcuts, and that's where it starts to suffer. And on the back end, we haven't found a way to decentralize these systems as decentralized as the base layer. So it's just a thing that you just have to put in work to get done. It's not something that requires rocket science and many years of research. It's just stuff that there's higher priorities right now, like account abstraction and all this other stuff. And then coming back around, just decentralizing it. We have to run these for a couple of years to make sure they're safe, iron out the bugs, and then decentralize them.
Now, while we're still on the layer 2 concept, are there any specific use cases for layer 2, specifically on the Syscoin network, that you see at this point?
Yeah, so this is where it gets interesting, because we've really been thinking about this for a long time. We don't want to make one block and say, hey, this is a layer 2. We could do layer 3 and we could do layer 4. Let's just keep copying this block because the tool is standard. So I think ZK will always have overhead. It will always have additional overhead on top of just running the thing natively, like what Optimistic is. But Optimistic has this extra security required, assuming someone is watching. One honest person has to watch, which is not that nice, right?
Okay.
So, but the ZK doesn't have that. So the way we think about it is everything being settled on as a base layer, like a layer 2, ideally should be a ZK base, right? It should be a ZK base because it doesn't need to be super duper fast. It needs to be fast enough, faster than the base layer, but it doesn't have to be gazillions of transactions a second. Maybe it can. Maybe
the security and validation is more important on ZK.
Right. Yeah, and we want to remove that honest validator assumption, because even one honest validator, if he can't catch up to the chain or his server gets shut down, or a whole bunch of things can go wrong, and the time to exit is 7 days, and there's a lot of issues there. If we could just remove all of that and say, let's just make it as decentralized as possible, it's way easier to make ZK decentralized than it is something like optimistic and safer to use. So you could probably compete against Visa and MasterCard on there, but you don't want to. It's not going to go much further, even with ASICs. So ZK is going to be a base, and then if you want to run bare metal software, like think about running Binance, right?
Yep.
You're running Binance without custody. It becomes sort of like a custom rollup. Now that wouldn't be done on a ZK EVM. It doesn't make sense to do that, because Binance runs a off-chain matching engine that's running in Java or C++, and it's running in CPU memory and CPU cache, and it doesn't even touch the hard drive. The trades are happening right within cache. As soon as you get into an EVM world, you have to fetch from cache, fetch from hard drive, fetch from even the cloud to get stuff, and price oracles and all this sorts of nonsense. So it doesn't scale if you're starting to go down the EVM road. You'd want to run it as native as possible. Even take the actual C++ code and run that in a deterministic way. And so our take there is you can't do that with ZK, because to do in ZK, you'd have to take a look at the Binance engine. You'd have to say, okay, let me do a ZK wrapper on top of that, just to make sure that everything happening inside is safe. But that ends up adding all that overhead, right? And it's hard
data.
It's hard to parallelize that as well to make it fast. But if you want to run it native, it's fast because it's running on Binance fast enough. You need to run that native. And so these end up becoming almost like custom, we call them dApp chains. And that's what Polygon is doing. That's what ZK Sync is doing. That's what her Starkware is doing, right? They're calling,
and that's what you can see the layer 2 as a dApp chain?
Layer 2 would be the base. It would be like your layer 1 is the court system. Layer 2 is like your ZK base. For now, it's going to be optimistic, but we'll later convert that into a decentralized ZK base. And then your app chains could be likely something like an optimistic based native custom execution. Could also have EVM based ones, but most likely most of the companies and most of the big players will prefer to run native execution because of the speed and the performance and being able to code in any program in any language. Run that native. And that running native would open up many new doors, like in terms of GameFi and trading and even AI, because AI isn't going to be coded on the EVM. It's going to be running specific software that has parallel cluster processing built in. It's going to be running natively. You're never going to rewrite that thing, especially when it starts to code itself and it's become smart. Running that in an optimistic route requires making it deterministic. It's starting to become possible to do that. So I would say your optimistic chains will become your dApp chains off of your layer 2, but the base doesn't need to be super fast. These dApp chains have to be super duper fast. I'm talking about millions and millions or billions even operations per second. And no EVM or no Solana or no Sui or nothing can support that.
Nothing that's available today, right?
Yeah, you'll have to run that native metal, but still deterministic, and optimistic is the only way to really do that. So that's the way I see it, is the base layer will be ZK decentralized, and then the dApp chains will start plugging on top. Those will be your layer 3s.
Now, you spoke on GameFi. Is there any opportunity for GameFi to tie into Syscoin?
So those are we are researching ways to run the actual game in a deterministic way, like almost as a roll up, right? You create a bridge so that your assets can come, your USDT or Syscoin can come into the game, or your NFTs can go in and out of the game. But then the game itself just has to add that wrapper to say, okay, I'm accepting assets from this bridge and I'm giving you the assets in the game. But then the game becomes deterministic itself. The game is not running kind of an exe
doesn't
file.
need to be on the network itself.
It doesn't need to be on the network, but it's still just like it's running on the blockchain. But it's running on your computer without ever touching the blockchain, except when you transfer those assets. But it's
in and out.
Yeah. So like, why did Ethereum even get created? It's because the founder of Ethereum was playing World of Warcraft and his assets were taken away, and that game itself wasn't deterministic. That's the problem he's solving with Ethereum, right?
Okay.
Is the whole thing has to be deterministic. But when we started Ethereum, we thought, okay, everything has to move into the EVM for it to be deterministic. Well, with an optimistic assumption, you can actually make that external program probabilistic and deterministic. It has to run to sequence. It can never change its code. Meaning, if an asset was transferred within the game, it has to do that by definition. It's just like it's running it on the chain.
Could it do that by verifying the transaction? The same concept as moving an NFT between wallets. It'd be one user account to another, and it'd just read that hash.
Yeah, so it's all like when you're withdrawing, then you have to use the blockchain to tell it, here's my withdrawal transaction, just check on the blockchain. But when you're in the external system, you just have to make sure the external system is running to how you think it should be running. You know, the hash of the program, and every time you run it, the program is running to spec, and it's not modifying its own code. That's the only thing. And then this is why on Twitter I'm starting to talk about AGI, because AI, the scare is the AI is going to morph its code, and the training could be dynamic, but the actual runtime of the AI ends up morphing itself, creating new outputs, and the outputs we don't like, they're dangerous to us. So, you know, if it morphs itself, we should be able to detect that. We should be able to intercept that and say, you know, we're rolling back that sequence because it's not running the hash of the code that you said it should be running. In the same way as games, the same way as trading matching engines, off-chain matching engines, the same way as any other program that wants to run natively, you could take the native code and make it deterministic. It's kind of like a very sort of new Pandora box view of taking any software, any financial app, any gamification, and adding digital assets to it and accepting it safely without any real big trade-offs.
Because overall, the way I look at gaming tying into blockchain, whether it be a PlayStation 5 game, a PC game, Xbox, the concept that I like to look at is the way Fortnite runs. And you have in-game assets, you have in-game coins or tokens. And like even my son, he's got like $500 worth of value on his Fortnite account. So if that account was ever to be disabled, he'd lose out on that whole $500. But if they were held in a decentralized offline wallet and the game itself was just verifying the transactions or what's held within, the same as the in-game assets, if they're looked at as an NFT and the game is just pulling that data sequence, that's the real use case I could see with gaming right now tying into blockchain. And like you said, it wouldn't even necessarily have to run on chain. It would just have to be fast enough to verify them transaction hashes. What do you think about that?
Yeah, one step further even, that the game cannot actually, if you're spending that asset and you bought a sword or another shield, you traded it for something else, that has to actually happen. If they're not allowed to say, no, you did not do that trade in the game. So that's what determinism gets you. The next step from there is let's add the fancy graphics and call it metaverse, because that's what the deterministic. If you start to get into the metaverse, things have to happen in a certain way. There can't be any certain control that says, oh, you went to this store and you looked at a painting and you bought something, but now we're just taking the painting away from you because we could. An MEV attack or something, right? But it needs to be deterministic, so that everything you've done has to be done because you've signed on it and it was accepted by the network and the network processed it. So you start with a game, right? And you make them deterministic, and then you start to look past that and you say, okay, now that we have things deterministic, this thing runs super duper fast, it can scale, it offers economies of scale. You get the real metaverses. Right now, metaverse is just BS. You get the real sort of metaverses once you can scale the graphics up. And we have the capability to scale the graphics up now.
Now, overall with this interview, is there anything you feel we haven't discussed or you'd like to share with the community before we wrap this up?
Yeah, no, I mean, my headspace right now is trying to figure out, even like Elon today was saying he's pessimistic on this whole AGI stuff. And I think, if you think about the broad picture, if you really, really think about it, it's almost as if blockchain was put in place because of the advent of AI and the use of AI. And that's what's going to be naturally using it as the main stream of settlement of value and transactions. So I'm thinking of how to make those things deterministic to create responsible singularity, which I have on my Twitter, is something I've been thinking about for a long time. And besides that, it's for us, we are just kicking off our sort of adventures into getting our TVL and users on board. We've waited a long time. We've made our community wait a long time. But now, for us, we've been running our networks. We've checked everything is safe. It's healthy on the test nets. And for us, the next step is to get those test nets out and launch on the mainnet. But we're thinking long term. We're not just here just say, oh yeah, like we'll do it. We'll pull a Solana and then go into top 10 and everyone's happy. The end. The movie's over. We're thinking long term, and that's why I'm saying, long term, these systems have to be robust against us totally ripping up everything on the cloud and turning everything off and turning everything on, and things have to be safe. So in that context, we are thinking of our base layer as a black box, opening up the secondary layer, and then inviting the developers in to say, you guys use your imagination. We're stepping back. You guys build. We have a few products we think are interesting infrastructure, like the social wallets and the trading and stuff like that, but letting really in the hands of the community and letting them decide the fate. And hopefully it's robust enough that it holds up against any sorts of issues that come up.
Okay. Well, I think that concludes this episode. This is Syscoin with the co-founder, Jag. Thank you for being here, brother.
Thanks, man. Look forward to the next one.
All right. Have a good day.
Thanks.